Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Nather, and I am on a mission to understand how young people see the world. You are about to watch an interview between myself and someone else who is under 25 years old about their worldview. That is their identity, religion, and politics. As you watch this interview, please keep in mind that in 5, 10, 40 years from now, we are not going to be the same people as we are today. And if we are the same people as we are today, then we have done a bad job of listening and learning to the people around us. So without further ado, enjoy. Hello, everybody. This is Echo. I met her yesterday. She's a really cool person. It was lovely to talk to. Echo, tell me a little bit about yourself, like 2 or 3 minutes.
Anything specific?
I don't know, like where you grew up, what you love doing.
Okay, so my name is Echo Splain. I grew up in Florida, South Florida.
Okay.
I was very much a third culture kid, which I kind of like. My parents are amazing, and so much of my life is just based off of their influence. General interests: love art, love anthropology, and culture.
Okay. Anthropology is the study of humans, right?
Yeah, it's also studied culture. Like,
Okay.
yeah. Specifically, like I like food anthropology. I like studying, and like art. So
Okay.
studying the influence of those on culture and vice versa.
Okay, cool. Is that something like you went to college for, or you just like really like?
No, just really like it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Did you by chance go to college or no?
I didn't.
Okay.
I was going to go to culinary school.
Okay. I didn't go to college either, just so,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
you know.
Fine.
So.
I was going to go to culinary school, and lockdown happened right after I graduated.
Oh, okay.
And there's no point learning how to make a quiche from a YouTube video. So like
Yeah.
that kind of that fell through. I worked in kitchens, and then I got to the point in my culinary journey that I was advised by all of my chef mentors just not to go at all, just to stay in the kitchens because I had already learned as much as I would in school. So
jumping into the first question,
mhm.
what would you say are key points of your identity?
So key points of my identity. Identify as Christian. I am autistic, and identify as queer.
Okay. So tell me, I didn't know about the autistic thing.
Mhm.
So,
Jump scare.
well, no, I'm just curious. You don't, you just don't have like the,
Telltale signs of
you
autism.
don't have the
Yeah.
telltale signs of it. Yeah.
Very, like, most people are very familiar with a very male representation of autism. There's the way stimuli affects the brain is different between men and women.
Okay.
And so how it manifests can be very different. That's why I'm drawing with stuff, because it keeps my hands busy. Gives me external stimulus so I can focus.
Okay, cool.
But it's genetic in my family. Usually it's passed down paternally. For me, it's my mom's side of the family. Everyone's neurodivergent. Everyone in my family is.
Yeah.
My sisters are one is dyslexic, one
Yeah,
has apraxia. So like there's just little weird brain things.
Yeah.
But that's why I get really hyper focused on specific things like latte art or coffee or anthropology. It's just like whatever I'm focused on, I will usually go 100% at. So,
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I haven't done any kind of like testing like that. I know I'm dyslexic, but that's no, it's like I couldn't read until I was like 11 kind of thing. But no, I don't know if I'm autistic or not. So Christian, autistic, queer. Tell me about specifically like the Christian and queer. What were like the experiences that led up to you having those as part of your identity?
Okay, so I grew up very, very conservative Christian.
Okay.
And I have, and through just like going to church and also education based, I was homeschooled, very, very conservative Christian homeschooling, but also very open. My parents are very like, they're very good teachers, and so they won't teach something based from one worldview. They will always teach based from all worldviews. So I wasn't uneducated on other stuff.
Yeah.
But I still chose to be Christian.
Okay.
And so because of how my brain works, I'm hyper logical to an extent.
Yeah.
And so defining myself as queer, I know that if you're looking at like quote unquote heteronormativity
Okay.
and like heterosexuality,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of my history, I don't fit into that category. So if I do
Okay.
not fit into that category, then I am innately queer.
Okay. What? Just because I'm
You're good.
slightly unfamiliar with the language, I
Mhm.
try to keep up with
You're
it.
good.
But what experiences make would make you think that you're or have you
Yeah.
put on the identity of not heteronormative?
So like
If you feel comfortable talking
no,
about
you're
it.
fine.
Yeah.
It's like when I was little, I never and like even like growing up through high school, I can say I probably had one crush. One on
Yeah.
one guy
Yeah.
when I was in ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had one crush on one girl
Okay.
ever.
Yeah.
And so and it's never been like attraction. I would say it's more almost I don't want to say asexuality. It's just like I've never been compelled to be in a relationship, which is weird for someone who's 22 and a Gen Z person.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a very almost isolating mindset to be in, but also it's not quote unquote straight.
That doesn't seem so just like more asexual than
Asexual, like I'm a romantic. I love books. I love art.
Okay.
I love everything. And so like I understand that aspect. I can fall in love with the idea of people or with people very quickly.
Yeah.
But do I want to pursue them? No. Do I want them to pursue me? No, I
No.
don't really want
Okay.
any interaction with the person.
Okay.
And I don't know if that stems from, being autistic or
Yeah,
if that
okay.
stems from like what exactly that comes from.
Yeah.
But I know it's not the norm for most people.
Okay. You seem like you're a pretty good friend though, like, with Mackenzie.
Mackenzie.
Yeah. So
So I, because of my upbringing and also like who I am, I think it might be the third cultural aspect where I can
whenever you say the third
culture. So like
third
a
culture.
kid who's
Okay.
not, so like I grew up in Florida, but I also grew up in Scotland and in Costa Rica and in like other countries and other cultures.
Oh, you left that out about yourself.
So like it affects how you fit into society and in general.
Okay.
And so and how you fit into social groups. I also, because of my innate social awkwardness,
Mm-hmm.
I've had to learn how to fit in with a lot of different people groups. And also I understand a lot of people groups. I understand, what it is to be attracted to women. So like I can relate to queer people.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I am Christian. Like
Mhm.
there's a difference between, in my brain, there's a difference between soul, who your spiritual body is, who you choose to be, like what you choose as your faith, and what an earthly body experiences.
Yeah.
And it's very black and white in my brain.
Okay. So, now just because, and this is like just like a really bold question.
I don't care.
So, well, yeah, I'm gonna ask it now.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of tension between the like identifying as queer and your Christianity? Okay.
Yeah, it's constant turmoil.
So, tell me a little bit more about that.
Just because I grew up, like I'm Protestant Christian, very Calvinist for most of my Christian journey.
Yeah.
I would be the person who would sit there and be like, "You're going to hell. Here's the reasons why."
So fire and brimstone, or are you like a 5-point Calvinist? Do you know what I mean by the 5 points?
Explain.
Okay, so there's like it's called TULIP. It's like the perseverance of saints, predestination, limited atonement, irresistible grace, and something else.
Yes,
okay.
I was raised 5 point. Yeah, 5 point. Yeah, and so coming to terms with the fact that like who I am as like an earthly body, like who I am on the planet Earth.
Yeah.
And what I believe in as a Christian don't align. And there's a lot of people will choose one or the other, and like coming with terms that I'm going to have to choose one or the other.
Yeah.
Very difficult.
Okay. So just really quick, do you want to put your?
Is it not close enough?
It's.
There we go.
That's great.
Okay.
That's perfect. Yeah. I like. So it's like it's super minor. There's like noise dampeners that I use in editing for like background noise, and the closer somebody is to the mic,
easier it
is to like distinct. Especially like if you go into like because I have audio editing software, so you can like isolate wavelengths. So if they're closer to the mic, then you can tell that all the wavelengths above a certain level are their voice, and so you just
strip everything out.
Strip everything out other than what's their voice. So
there we go.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
So I'm not saying, I'm trying not to say this as a statement, but it sounds like you're saying that you're going to have to make a choice.
Yeah.
But you're kind of postponing, like.
It's not that I'm postponing, it's that it's constant turmoil. If I were to put like an analogy, like if you're going to think about sexual sin in general, okay, you can think about that in terms of, a heterosexual sexual sin. If you're going premarital sex, or if you're talking about, adultery, anything like that, it falls under sexual sin. And so it's the same thing that most Gen Z people struggle with, even conservative Christians and Gen Z people. It's that whole constant struggle with who you are as a human, and earthly urges and earthly identity in society and everything, and what that looks like in reflection to who you are biblically.
Okay. So because would you not identify it maybe, so it doesn't sound like you're in like just because of my faith in belief in Christianity, it doesn't sound like you're sinning because you haven't acted on it.
I choose not to.
You choose not to.
Yeah.
So it's just a temptation.
But it is very much real. So it is. I am queer. I just not active.
So it's a big part of your identity because it's a thing you struggle with. Okay, understood.
Yeah.
So then, on your faith in Christianity, what? So it sounds like your parents are Christians.
Yeah.
And I heard you.
My dad's a pastor.
Your dad's a pastor.
He's not in active church now.
Okay.
From between like 2012 and 2016 or 17. Okay. That was when he was. It was a non-denominational church.
Okay.
Really cool. Loved it.
Was it non-denominational? Would you say it was like more left-leaning or right-leaning church?
Right. Very right. Okay. Yeah.
I was just curious because sometimes when you like
it's very open when you say non-denominational. Yeah.
So, mainly because I was kind of curious if that affected your identity at all, or like your temptation.
No, like with my parents, I think my mom, she probably knows I struggle, but it's not. It's one of those things like they know that I'm fine, and if I have any questions, my parents will answer them.
Yeah, but
it's. Other than that, they'll check in. You good? Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. Cool.
And that's the extent.
So growing up with Christian parents, and I know they diversified your worldviews. What were the key defining factors that made you decide I'm a Christian?
Partially my parents, because they're a Christian, they felt my dad was a private chef, and through that we were put up in one of his boss's houses. Okay. My parents are not materialistic at all, and so it was a big house. They didn't know what to do. So as a way of using space for my entire childhood, we would take in people who needed places to stay. And give them places. And so until I was probably 12, 13 years old, we didn't live alone in our own house. And so, and they didn't discriminate. We had people of every religion, every any identity possible coming into our house, living. And my parents always respected that. They would, if someone was Muslim, they would make sure they had the space so that they could pray. And they would we would have dinner, we'd have everything
Mhm.
together, and so I would learn everything. Like
Yeah.
I read the Quran, like I did
Mhm.
all of these things, and so I was doing other religion studies and other
Yep.
like culture studies,
Yep.
and it allowed me to knowledgeably make my own decisions in
Yeah.
my faith. So at the same time, I was doing my own
Mhm.
schooling, and I was doing all of that. I was doing my own Bible studies, and I was able to compare it, look at history, look at art, look at philosophy, and
Mhm.
how everything connects, and make a logical decision as well as a spiritual decision on what
Okay.
made the most sense.
What was the logical things that led to you?
So like, I mean, people will always point to like the similarities between if you're reading like Greek myths and
Mhm.
Roman legends and all of these things, and like
Yeah.
how they line up with instances in the Bible in terms
Mhm.
of like the flood and stuff like
Yeah.
that, and like
Mhm.
looking at that, and then looking at evolution and evolutionary science
Mhm.
and all of the discrepancies in that, and
Yeah.
proof of all of these
Yep.
historical events
I
and the
agree
ice
with
age
her.
and
No.
everything. um and just being able to go, okay, well, there's a lot of external proof to what the Bible says that just further pushes that whole thing. And also, and then being able to back that up with faith, like
Mhm.
with things like I think when I was like 11, um I remember very vividly, just it was Ash Wednesday.
Mhm.
I was struck down in faith, like to the point where I was 11 years old. I was a
Yeah.
kid. And we were worshiping, and like all of a sudden I was on the floor crying. And it was
Yeah.
like very much that I like, people don't have those kinds of like that kind of presence, like where you're with
Yeah.
God in
Mhm.
that moment, and you're able to have firsthand like proof of
Mhm.
who you are worshiping, who like
Yeah.
where
Okay.
your faith comes from, that personal connection to God.
Mhm.
And I've had that. And so like it's not something where I'm like constantly having to prove to myself that God
Yeah.
exists. I
Yeah.
know that he exists,
Mhm.
and then I'm constantly finding a whole bunch of proof for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like that was very important. And the fact that my parents, even though they were conservative and Christian, allowed they trusted, they shepherded, they gave me all of the right information,
Mhm.
but they allowed me to make my own decisions.
Okay. Sorry, that was a separate alarm. Okay. I still got 9 minutes on the timer. So your parents still allowed you to make separate decisions.
Mm-hmm.
What was the thing that made you choose? Because you mentioned Muslim people
Mm-hmm.
uh, living with you. So what was the thing that separated Christianity from Islam or any other belief in God system that you encountered? Was it
Um,
mainly that your parents had it, or that you experienced some kind of spiritual connection while worshiping God, or would you say there was some other logical reason that you came to that conclusion?
the conclusion just in like New World, like the New Testament, things
Yeah,
like that.
like New Testament. Like I know that there's just with like the Muslims I've talked to, they depending on which ones you talk to, they'll believe that the Torah or the Old Testament that's in the Bible we have now is corrupted, that kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I didn't know if you had
Um,
what made the distinction for you, or if you had thought super deeply about it.
when I was in school, like middle school ish, um, I hyper focused
Yeah.
on the resurrection, everything
Okay.
like that.
Yeah.
And so I went on a mission to find every single external source there was that I could find of proof of Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just not specifically just death and resurrection, just
Mm-hmm.
existence
Yeah.
and
Okay.
impact on society,
Yeah.
everything. That along with the fact Paul's always been one of my favorite writers.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So like there's a lot of that. And also the fact that I am I made the decision to read a lot of different translations of the Bible.
Okay. Yeah.
So I went through and I read that, and because I was a kid that was obsessed with logic and logical syllogism and sentence structure and exact wording. I also studied Latin when I was in high school, and so like taking things into, even if it's not the original language, but taking it back a couple languages in translation and seeing how things are worded that way. Just being able to find concrete evidence of things that I believe outside of the Bible, because the Bible is great. It's a wonderful text, but being able to back it up and be able to back it up in conversation was one of the, probably the key thing that made me choose that. Because when I went to other religions and I tried to do the same thing for those religions, there weren't a lot of external texts that supported the key ideologies or key texts in those religions. And so, but there was that for Christianity.
Okay. Yep. I agree. Yeah, because the thing that led up to me like becoming or being a follower of Christ was the logic behind it. That wasn't the end all. I feel like there's been sanctifying experiences that I've had that outside of just like logical thought, but that was the thing that made my mind on it. So I definitely can resonate with that a little bit.
Like that's something my roommate and I talk about a lot, because like I'm very logical, but for her it's a lot of like conviction based, and I think that's something that is very unique to religion in general, but in Christianity it's very obvious, like that innate sense of right and wrong when you're educated on what it says in the Bible and what morality is in the Bible and everything. The way you feel conviction is very, very evident. Like, just innately, even if it's something that you're like, oh, I didn't even realize I was doing something wrong. You can just feel it through your spirit that something is wrong. And it's like being able to be in touch with that, as well as having all of the logical thought behind it. But being able to tap into that, because that's another big part of it. That's like the not describable part of faith, is like that's there. It's not just a moral compass that you have, because moral compass, you're making decisions purposefully that either go against or towards whatever moral compass or top compass you have. But conviction is outside of that. You feel it regardless.
So considering parts of your identity and your faith in Christianity, how does that influence your politics?
Don't know how to answer that.
What things politically do you care about?
Politically do I care about? I think first and foremost, I care about education.
Okay.
Definitely probably the most passionate thing. I then it would probably be medicine.
Okay.
And then, because I think that education directly influences medicine. Education as a whole directly influences every single other aspect of politics.
Okay.
And in order to,
I don't like question it, but I just have not heard that like as a thought before. So do you mind breaking that down a little
yes,
for me?
okay. So my logical, the way that my brain processes it is, if you're going to, let's say, talk about reproductive rights or gender or LGBTQ rights or fiscal rights, or whether like legal anything, in order to even start a conversation, a person has to be educated on the subject. And in order for education to happen, you need to have an intact education system. And
for sure.
Of understanding of how education works and the different ways people are educated. I know for a fact, if I was put into a public school setting, I would have failed. The way my brain works, the average diagnosis age for a woman with autism is 17 to 19 years old.
Really?
Whereas with men, it's between 3 and 5 years old.
Okay.
So it's not caught, but it does do all of the same things. You're still living with all of the the same aspects of the disability, but it's not caught. And
Okay.
so I can't imagine having to sit down for
Mm-hmm.
that long of a period of time, or have to be forced to learn a specific way for
Mm-hmm.
that period of time. And so that aspect of education, where it comes to learning disabilities, but also just content.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I was blessed by the fact that my mom was able to stay home and
Yeah.
teach, and the fact that my dad quite literally is a genius. He's like
Yeah.
IQ wise, literally a genius.
Yeah.
And through his dyslexia, he has he has 80% auditory recall. So this man, 80% of everything he has ever heard in his life,
Can recall.
he knows.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that I was blessed to just have like the look of the draw that my parents are very smart, and that they're open and they're willing to teach, and that they were able to teach.
Mm-hmm.
That's not like most of the population doesn't have that.
Yeah.
And then when you look
Yeah.
at what the current education system looks like, where we rank globally, but also just where kids are, where like the
Yeah.
general happiness of kids, Gen Alpha,
Mm-hmm.
Gen Z, and also just the base knowledge that kids are leaving school with,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a lot there. And so
Yeah.
I think that my politics are affected the most by that aspect, because it
Okay.
angers me, because like I try to have a discussion with somebody,
Mm-hmm.
and they're coming to the table with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even
Yeah.
that they don't have any content.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't been taught how to teach themselves either, because
Mhm.
it's very much a format of here is material,
Mm-hmm.
you'll be tested on it in a week. There's
Yeah.
no
Mm-hmm.
like push to memorize, unless the kid decides themselves that they want to
Yeah.
go for honors, that they want to.
Mm-hmm.
They have to decide that. There's no like
Yeah.
mentoring into that. It's not the culture of learning. And so I find that very annoying in
Mm-hmm.
terms
Oh, yeah.
of trying to have those debates, because
Well, I don't know if I.
it affects my politics.
So I may have mentioned this, and I think I may have mentioned this actually on this podcast for people listening, but for every one podcast I release, I interview 4 people, right? So, and not, I mean, everybody's opinion is valuable.
Yeah.
But some people do sound more interesting than others, and and not only that, but it's if they're a little bit more thought out on it, you know, it's a lot more comforting for me to put that out into the world than somebody who's really still figuring it out, which is okay to be figuring it out.
Yeah.
But to at least like have some kind of thought of like where you're going, how you're trying to think about things, what you're learning, that kind of thing. And just I've also just witnessed, because I was homeschooled, and growing up, I did not realize the density of highly intelligent, passionate people I was around.
Yeah.
Right, like especially in like the homeschool co-op that I went to through high school. I remember just thinking that everybody who hadn't, just for, this is just kind of like a reference, not that I knew everybody had it, but it felt like everybody had an IQ of 135 or higher.
I felt so stupid my entire life.
Yeah, so I felt so stupid, and then I leave and I experience normal people, and I'm like, what is? And then so honestly, being around that in high school made me think, why on earth do we have a welfare system? Like, you know, because you just think like everybody's smart, and so not that I think there's a lot of ways that welfare is abused, but it's just kind of funny thinking about. I was so desensitized to really, really smart, gifted people.
Yeah.
And then experiencing as a homeschooler, not that all homeschoolers are smart. I have
I've met some stupid homeschoolers.
Yeah. There's 2 reasons why you're homeschooled, and it's because you're on one of 2 spectrums that doesn't land in public school. So, and honestly, as a dyslexic person, I landed on both ends of the spectrum.
Yes, like Lamb's autistic, so both sides.
Both sides. And I could, I don't know how. I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but like I can probably relate with your dad. Like I just everything I listen to, it just stays there. I don't forget things.
Yeah, it was so horrible living as a child because I tried to lie to that man. No, he's gonna remember 5 years ago you said like, no.
Yep. And I think yeah, I'm gonna have to be mindful of my kids with that because I don't want to I don't know. I just know how terrible it was for my siblings, so I'm gonna try and
Yeah, it was an interesting dynamic between my sister who's extremely dyslexic and me who's extremely attention deficit prone because she remembered everything, I forgot everything, and then we tried to argue and it just didn't work.
So I've heard this before. Maybe you can attest to it or not. Is it ADHD or ADD?
So
Is it
ADD isn't quite like a attention deficit disorder, like, but because I mentioned earlier the difference between like female and male presentations.
Yeah.
In terms of like diagnostic criteria, it's a little bit different between men and women. Usually women are not hyperactive. So for a long time, people were diagnosing people with ADD, attention deficit disorder, not attention deficit hyperactive disorder.
Okay.
And so that is separate. It's still, you're still considered neurodivergent, but it's a different thing than autism.
Yeah.
Autism is it's a neurological problem and also like your nervous system. So I have both. Wonderful.
Okay.
They mash up, and it's part of the reason why it's not as obvious because I deal with both insane understimulation and insane overstimulation at the same time, and they on an external level feel like they look like they kind of cancel out.
Yeah. Okay.
But it means that I can become very bored very quickly and then just leave. Just my brain just leaves, or I become so aware in the situation that I get super overwhelmed and just shut down. And so it's that kind of aspect. But ADHD, I am still hyperactive, thus the drawing circles and stuff like that. Because sitting still is difficult. But then like the stimming aspect, I do a lot of this stuff like that, playing with my clothing, stuff like that. That's just like taught things that my mom helped with a lot that our way of just like socially acceptably being autistic.
Yeah. The thing I was kind of just really quick because I want to ask you more about how medicine affects all of
a big part.
Politics / culture.
I've got a whole bunch. You're gonna love this stuff.
Okay, that's what I want to hear. That's what I wanted to hear. But for really quick on the ADD thing, does that cause? Because you mentioned not forgetting things. Does that cause more like short-term memory? But like, you can remember things that happened a long time ago, but not things that happened like 5 minutes ago, kind of thing.
It doesn't really affect memory in terms of if I experienced it, if I like took it in as information, I'll remember it.
Oh,
but
but
if
it's hard
I
to
didn't
intake
but
information.
yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't know if you've ever had like anxiety to the point where like you're not like people are talking to you and like you just aren't able to figure out what they're saying. Things like that where it's like
no, I said but I've never had that.
Yeah, it's difficult to describe, but it's if I can process the information, it stays. But it's a information processing disorder. So like, especially the autism, things like that. I'll look at somebody if they're talking to me. I'll say what like 5 times, and it's not that I haven't heard them. It's that my brain isn't processing what they're saying. It's a verbal or auditory processing problem.
Okay, yeah.
I also have to speak sometimes to process my own thoughts.
Because I might. So my sister has an auditory processing disorder. So that was always interesting.
Sound like you come from a little neurospicy family too.
Yeah, a little bit. So
a lot of homeschool people.
I think it's probably maybe it's the redhead. Maybe that's what it is.
Redhead thing. Yeah, genetics just.
So, so medicine and how that influences.
Yeah.
So one, I want to know what your basically analysis is. your analysis is of how it affects all politics and culture, but specifically how it affects your politics.
Okay. This is a big part of why I'm libertarian. First off, hate's a strong word, but I hate how medicine is affected by money and affects money.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Because, okay, so here's the hot take.
Okay.
There's, that argument that's like, don't immunize your kids because it'll make them autistic.
Mm-hmm.
So I am immunocompromised.
Mm-hmm.
We do not know if I reacted to the immunizations because I have no immune system, or if immunization killed my immune system to the point where I no longer have one. But I have that. My mom's autistic, so I wasn't like immunized to know I'm autistic. But it's always one of those funny things that people are like, oh, you're autistic and you had immunization injuries. But I was one of those kids that was immuno-injured.
Mm-hmm.
And
whenever you say immunization, you're talking about vaccines?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, vaccine. I was vaccinated when I was like, you have all of the little vaccines that you get when you're a baby.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there were probably 3. I know there was one immunization that I got that I reacted very, very, very badly to when I was like 6 months old.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mom stopped immunizing me because she did not want anything to do with that.
Yeah.
But then in order to have the childcare that she needed, they needed proof of continued vaccination. Yeah.
Okay.
And she was like, okay, so we're gonna. She like purposely took like the least. She did so much research, found the least reactive one ever.
My goodness.
I got immunized. She forced them to monitor me for half an hour after the immunization. I was on life support within half an hour in the hospital across the street, oxygen tent, everything. Almost killed me.
What?
Yes. And so that has affected
That's scary.
how medicine affects my life in a very, very large, like strong way.
Okay.
But
are you like are you like an anti-COVID vaccine? Was that like a?
I didn't get the COVID vaccine.
Okay.
I know, like there's sensitivity in my family. My dad got, I think it was the tetanus vaccine when I was little, and he was in the hospital for a week. And then my grandmother got the COVID vaccine because, and like that's understandable. She is of the age where she could have died from COVID. Mm-hmm. So you could argue that risk. Mm-hmm. But she almost died from the COVID vaccine. It caused a whole bunch of neurological problems. She couldn't speak for months. She still has tremors, head twitches, like all of these things. Yeah. They weren't pre-existing problems. They happened after. And then you have the whole like heart problems with the male population, everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then on the other side of that, my grandmother was a nurse for 40 years. And so she was there when a lot of immunizations were first like becoming big. Mm-hmm. And so I understand the argument for some of them. Like they should exist. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't be mandated.
Yeah. Yep.
They should be an option for people if there is if there is a life risk. Mm-hmm. They should be accessible, but they should not be forced because there are people that die.
Well, I know.
Also, the fact, I know I'm interrupting, but there's a lot of immunization injury cover up in this country. It's not talked about. Like there's there's institutions in place that will pay for your medical expenses after immunization injury, and in return that is not documented. Like it's written off. So any statistics you read, if there's someone who can't afford to pay $30,000 in medical bills, then they're not going to be part of that statistic.
Yep.
So
now whenever you say they're mandatory, what extent of mandatory do you mean?
So like discriminating based like education, travel, things like that, where you're not allowed to do certain things that you should be able to as a free American.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Unless you're vaccinated, things like that.
Yeah. Okay.
I understand if it's like you know, if you're a healthcare worker and you're going
Yeah.
into like hospice or you're going into nursing homes, things like that, then there are things you don't want to be carrying.
Yeah.
But in terms of like being able to get childcare for your child when they're 2 years old, you shouldn't have to have them vaccinated against 15,000 different things in order for that to happen, because most of the things that these vaccinations are for are not prevalent. Like there's like
Yeah.
smallpox. What?
Well, the oh, sorry, I had to
You're okay.
text a buddy. Not home. Sorry, bro. The you know, I'm just putting this out there. This being me being pretty open. It's like like I was never vaccinated. Like my parents, because I was outside the system the whole time.
Yeah.
So I just
My sisters weren't vaccinated. After me, my parents were like, nope, never again.
Yeah, to be honest, that might have been what led to homeschooling a little bit, because I know public schools require a lot of that. Yeah. Or at least lots of public schools. I don't know
specific, but yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, my wife was never vaccinated either, and so that led us to not vaccinating our daughter.
Yeah.
Because we both ended up being really healthy, like relatively.
My sister's way healthier than me. So much healthier than I am.
Yeah, that's kind of rough.
It really sucks. Like, I didn't even do anything.
Man, that's
just got done being sick for 3 weeks.
Really?
3 weeks, yes.
Man.
Because like I don't have an immune system, so if I get sick, then I don't have anything there after I'm done being sick to prevent me getting sick again. I'm even weaker, and then I have no lungs. So that sounds weird. I have like the lungs of an 80-year-old. So like then it will turn into pneumonia or something like that, and then I'm just stuck there, and I'm like someone's grandpa, where it's like, oh yeah, I just been sick for forever.
Yep. So vaccines, big pharma paying off. It sounded like big pharma. Yeah, big pharma paying people's medical bills so they don't show up on statistics, so it doesn't show vaccine or immunization injuries.
Yeah.
Continue.
Well, I mean, that's most of that, because most of it was when I was young, but it's just also just continual struggle to be able to find, a doctor, to have a doctor if you're not vaccinated. There'll be doctors that won't touch you. They won't take you as a patient if you're not vaccinated.
Okay, yeah.
And it's like, I will die. There's also like kindergarten. I had documentation of vaccine injury, and there were kindergartens that turned my family away because they would only take like a religious exemption, not a medical exemption or things like that. Yeah. And a lot of like, it's just like human rights that get taken away because you're not feeding into that. So that person is like one of the biggest ways that medicine or the medical system in the United States has affected my politics, things like that. I'm always paying attention to that, because I feel like when you're watching political debates and things like that, it's one of the lesser things that's talked on because it's such a touchy topic because there's so much money there. So being very, very conscious where you're voting and where you're supporting, where you're donating money, things like that, because it has a pretty big effect on people's lives. And like, even if it doesn't affect you personally, most people know someone who has pretty severe medical issues. So like, be careful.
Yep.
Yeah.
So is there something that, and this is not to like call you out or anything, but is it something that you care about? But is there something that you're doing to actually like push the system in a direction you'd like? Or
I mean, through my voting habits, yes. But
how do you, can I ask you how you vote?
I'm registered Republican, but I will vote moderate. Will vote in any way that I don't vote based off of party affiliation. Like, usually it falls Republican. But
Okay.
if there's someone who I don't agree with their morality, I don't agree with their policies, things like that, I'm going to choose a different party.
Okay.
That hasn't happened yet, but I
Okay.
always will educate myself on it, and I don't. There are people who are like, I'm not going to vote for someone unless they're a Republican. No, I'll vote for. I'll vote for someone who's right.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so that I had something else I was going to talk about. Oh, and then the whole autism thing.
Yeah.
Everyone in my family knows I'm autistic. I've been referred to. I've been referred to psychiatrists by 3 different doctors. Like there's everyone knows I'm autistic. I refuse to get diagnosed autistic. It is $3,000 to $5,000 to get a diagnosis, which that's insane.
It is.
And
also why I haven't gone and done anything about it.
Yeah. I don't like that, but also both. I mean, there's stigmas that are around being autistic in general, in the general population. Medication. I mean, lots of ADHD kids especially are medicated from a really young age because of they're back to the education system because they don't fit into that. But then you have these kids, they're like doped up because their brain doesn't work normally.
Yeah.
It just works differently.
It's interesting how the more we're learning about it, because some of it I think is like our environment, but I'm not entirely bought into that. I think that we're just we're learning more and more how to identify differences in the way our brains work.
Yes.
And what's interesting is like the dyslexia thing. It's like 1 in 5 people have dyslexia. So at that point, is it not normal?
Yeah, it's like at one point does it go take that that bridge from like a minority to not a minority?
Yeah, like I mean it's still a minority, but
a lot of people have
20% of
and that's where you look at like the severity thing and also disability thing. Like at one point does it become a disability because you can be quote unquote neurodivergent without it being a disability to your life.
Yeah, because you can push through it.
Yeah. So like I would be considered ASD1. There's a scale 1 to 3 based off of how you.
I think
fall.
3 is the most severe, right?
Yes.
So I'm 1 and my sister's 3.
Your sister's 3.
Or I don't even know if it was 3, but it was the highest one.
Yeah.
So it was like super
dyslexic. So my sister's the same way, which is not very common for women. A lot of times, women don't have as severe of symptoms with dyslexia, and it falls back. I could talk for hours on that because it's hyper focus. But that affects a lot of my medical things because like even if you're thinking not local to the United States, there are countries that if you have an autism diagnosis, your rights are taken away, and things like that where it can limit your travel abilities. If you want to go for citizenship or visas or work visas, things like that internationally, you instantly can be disqualified or overlooked because you have these specific disabilities. And it's like bringing a lot of awareness to that. I try to educate my friends as much as possible because there's a lot of misinformation on those subjects. So making sure that.
What kind of misinformation do you feel like there is that you actually like hear from other people?
Just a lot of like preconceived notions on what autism is, and also lack of understanding on how it affects the body physically, because a lot of people think of it as like a mental disorder. Which, yes, your mind is disordered because of the physical effects it has on your body. It's a nervous system thing. So like you're not able to, I mean, one of my favorite facts, if you take like a ADHD/autistic mind, if you take the brain at the end of their life and you weigh that in comparison to a neurotypical brain, it physically is heavier.
Oh, that's
because there
funny.
are so many more neural pathways that are built over the course of a life of a neurodivergent. So it's like there's so much more information being input. There's like 30 to 50% more information going into a neurodivergent brain because they're not able to process any of that stuff out. And so it's taking that input and then trying to take stuff from that and sort through it. And so trying to break down like the stigma around that aspect, and also educate on the physical aspects of autism, in terms of like there's like you don't feel pain the same way. You don't feel emotional pain the same way. You don't have the right levels of dopamine and serotonin and things like that in your brain. Chemically your brain is different. You don't regulate temperature the same way. You don't like there's all of these things where it's like it's not just that person really likes planes. It's a lot more than that, and just educating that aspect of it. And then the differences between gender. I mean, the DSM-5, the diagnostic book in 2020 updated so that there's actual diagnostic criteria for women with autism. But before that, there was barely anything. And like 20 years ago, it was arguable. Like doctors would argue that women could even like be like how autistic women could actually be. Like there is so much uneducation. And then like you could get into the medical aspect in terms of like medical studies and the gender difference.
Whenever I imagine somebody, to be honest, like maybe this is terrible because I've been influenced by
spinning in circles and flapping their hands. And
no, the image I have, like the Temple Grandin movie, I just imagine that's like the autistic person that I think of whenever I think of autistic.
You get me going in one of my special interests. It can start to look like that after a while. Also, it's funny, like if I have a glass of wine, Temple Grandin, because there's like I don't mask as much. Like I'm not, because I'm hyper aware of like where I am in my in a social setting, and so like you can like it's almost like acting, and so it will leave. And like if you look at video like child tapes of me when from when I was a kid, I still now like I drive in silence. It's the weirdest thing. I can drive for 3 hours, no music.
Oh yeah.
Crazy. People are like, you're a psychopath. I'm like, no, my brain is so loud. I can't deal with it. I can't deal with the music. And like spinning in circles, flapping my hands. Those things happen. There'll be times where my roommate she's like, you're making me sick. Like I'm watching you making me sick, because we got these little bar stools in our apartment recently.
Yeah.
And I wasn't paying attention. She was making dinner. I was sitting at the bar. I'd been spinning for like half an hour straight. No, I didn't realize it. But like those kinds of things where it's like, when you think that stereotype, it's still there.
Yeah.
It's very much a thing. But then there's people who figure out ways to do, those are all like physical stems. You figure out ways to do those more socially acceptable ones. Like for women, or for a lot of people, it's a lot of stuff with nails. Like they'll have stuff going on with their nails, their fingers, cracking their knuckles, doing stuff like that constantly. Like every human being stims, because it's just a way of processing physically. Yeah. But when you have so much more information,
you have to do a lot more.
You do it a lot more. Yeah. So the more overwhelmed I get, the more I'll do that.
Okay.
Sorry.
What do you? No, you're all good. I was. It's really cool listening to you talk about it. What do you think the meaning of life is? And maybe if that's too broad of a question, what do you think the meaning of your life is?
Okay, so in order to answer the question, I'm going to define terms.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So if you're talking what the meaning of life is as a broad like umbrella term, as an earthly life, as the life of our bodies, I think that we're here to learn as much as possible, to experience art, because art is a God-given gift. And to shepherd and teach other people. And then if you're talking to me personally, I think that my purpose in life is to kind of the same thing. To be able to learn, I feel like communication is something that's so innately human, and the way the way humans communicate is so innately human. And as someone who has a disability that affects that, being able to step outside of what is the societal norm for communication and find new ways to connect with people
Mm-hmm.
is something that is very much a purpose of a human life. And so whether that's through music or language, written language, universal languages like math or music or art or food, that's one of my other
Yeah.
favorite universal languages, but being able to take those and have impactful conversations and experiences with other human beings is probably what I would say the purpose of our life on earth is. And then in terms of if you're talking like spiritual life, like who your soul, the like who you are forever, would be to try to live to what Christ is. So trying to be compassionate, to find things to be passionate about, to be able to feel genuine love in all of its biblical forms, to be able to find things to, to feel righteous anger, to be able to find things that you can expand upon and learn about and
Okay.
educate on and share, and to be able to build family, whether that's chosen family or your own like related family, but being able to create a space where you have that form of safety and community.
Mm-hmm.
There you
Okay. That was really long, good.
go. I think about that a lot.
Okay, you do.
Yeah.
All right. What makes you think about it a lot?
Um, just because I feel like a lot of life in the 21st century is very superficial.
Okay.
Because whether it's because of social media, whether it's because of the lack of education on communication, the like, I mean, you think about classical education, what like where you weren't a lady unless you had an understanding of the arts, of the understanding of the philosophy, of the understanding of language, of the other, like you took, I mean, they don't even have home ec in schools anymore. And so
Yeah.
like all of these things that are so uniquely human are being lost, or they're not valued anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that a lot because, I mean, when you think about the best parts of your life, it's when you're having a wonderful meal with people you love, or you're at a concert, or you're doing all of these things. And they have nothing to do with social media. They have nothing to do with that superficial, like societal structure. They're outside of that. It's when you're behind those walls that you find all of that meaning and purpose and love and everything. And so my brain, I don't fit into a lot of social structures. And so it's, I think about that, and like it's one of those things that saddens me a lot because I see how people react to my family, because my family very much does, my family prioritizes that. It's one of those things, like we have, I mean, I just moved to Texas, but we still have family dinners, and you know, my dad was a chef, so like Thanksgiving every year was like 30 people, like all of the people who didn't have a family or have those connections, those would be the people that came to our house. And so like,
Yeah.
and the people who didn't have a home, giving them that space where they can feel safe, they can practice their religion, they can have a family, they can have food, and being able to educate that and share it with one another. I think about that constantly because it's one of the most important things, and I try to facilitate that as much as possible. And I thank my parents for giving me that education and that understanding of how important that is. But it is definitely a constant thing going on in my brain because I see a lot of my generation, especially and Generation Alpha, like the two newer generations, almost belittling it, thinking like it's classic, but it's classic for a reason. Those things are valued throughout history for a reason, and making sure we're still in touch with that.
One of the things, I see a lot is just there was a guy I interviewed. He was like, it's not classic nihilism. It's more like this teenage edgy nihilism. So,
yes.
I feel like I've encountered a lot of teenage edgy nihilism where it's just like, nothing matters.
It's like, it does. Like, right now I get a lot of friends who are like, the Earth's not even going to be here in 30 years. So, like, I'm like, dude.
That's okay. I don't know which Stoic or philosopher said it, but a society does well whenever people plant trees knowing that they won't live to see the fruit.
Yeah.
Right. So if you have the mindset, of course that's going to be it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So don't self-fulfill it. Plant the tree, care about the people who are going to be living in their prime 30 years from now.
Exactly.
Because it's not going to be you, and you shouldn't care about yourself in 30 years. You should be caring about other people. So be a little bit more altruistic.
Exactly. But that is very, very, like, that whole community thing I was talking about, like, our generation is very selfish, very, very selfish, where it's based off like how people find their identity, things like that. It's not found in community anymore. It's it's like people try to find their identity outside of community and then build a community based off of those.
Yeah.
Instead of finding it together. And it's like, it's a really weird thing. And I, like, through my history studies, I haven't really seen it outside of our generation, and I don't know if it is the social media aspect of it and how isolating and that is, but also how very visible you are.
Yeah,
but it's very weird.
I think it's becoming more individualistic. Like like we're isolated individuals outside of a community. Although, and not that I've read this from anybody else, but my observation is that Americans, since like the very beginning of this country, right? We've been more individualistic than any other country.
Yes.
Right. So I think that it stems from this mainly because I don't think that we weren't individualistic in the past. I think it's just more individualistic now.
Yeah.
And I think we were already in a really individualistic state compared to lots of other countries and cultures.
Yes.
Because, for me, I really believe this is the land of opportunity. And, just thinking about some of the people I talk to, because I work with a lot of people from Latin America and Brazil and that kind of thing. And it's not like a go and they don't go seize things. They don't. Yeah. And if somebody is if a politician is doing something bad, there's not an uprising. Yeah. By the people. To whereas like we have our whole country is based off of like multiple interactions like that, right? Like one side wanted to leave, the other side wanted to get rid of slavery, and we fought a war over it. Like it wasn't like this. We're
gonna talk it out for 45 years.
Yeah, talk it out for 45 years. No, we didn't do that. So it's this very like, we're gonna go and take it, and it wasn't. And that mindset doesn't come from a sense of community.
No,
it comes from a sense of like
individuality.
Yeah. So I think the thing I've thought about is that more than anything else, that I feel like I can relate to anybody who's left leaning, right leaning, far right, moderate, whatever, is I know that them as Americans we're gonna have a shared sense of community in our individualism.
Yes. Okay, so, I do agree with you on that. Yes.
Yeah, like I know that I'm going to.
We're all divas.
Yeah, we're all divas, and I think that that's more true of like the Americans that I'm going to talk to, no matter how much they disagree with me, than somebody who's from another country or culture.
The innate fact that they might all disagree with you proves your point.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So, anyways, I think that's some part of that is bad, but I think there is some amount of beauty in that. I do.
The ability the ability to have it is amazing. The fact that we live in a country where you're allowed to have your own thought, and you're able to act on your own individual thought.
Yep.
I think I might have misspoke with like I think I was talking more with like where kids are finding, I think more where kids are finding their identity and how isolated they then make themselves
Mm-hmm.
more than just being an individual.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, we live in a great country, especially because I'm from South Florida. So I grew up around a whole bunch of people, and like Cuba's right there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And like that's a great example because you hear so many firsthand stories, or I know so many people personally where the America is just so amazing, and being able to see it through fresh eyes over and over again growing up was very, very, very cool. The fact that I got to see the United States and like how wonderful it is to other people, because a lot of people take it for granted here. So it's
for sure. It's I try not to. I mean, it's really easy for me to. But what would be something that you would encourage other young people with, or a question you would have them ask themselves?
I encourage everyone to continually find ways to have renewed curiosity and renewed wanting of, like a renewed want of learning, because I feel where people, when life gets the most dull is when you no longer want to learn about something. And I personally find when I'm the most happy is when I am studying something I'm passionate about and studying fully and asking yourself all of the questions, not just the questions you want to hear. Going into every new topic that you find as a whole and studying it from every angle possible and getting as much input from outside sources, whether it's people or material or anything, as possible, and constantly talking about it and discussing it and communicate and finding ways to talk with people that you wouldn't normally talk to, because all of the best conversations in my life have happened in spaces where I'm talking to people I trust and or people who I know have a different mindset than me, because I'm continually learning. I'm continually learning and continually changing, and being open to the fact that you can be wrong and you can learn new things constantly, and you can have your opinions change, and that having your opinions change isn't a bad thing. Um, I I caution people. It's something I caution a lot of Christians on is
Being isolated from other
being
people's.
constantly, like, being isolated from other people, and also going into every interaction with someone who is not exactly who you are as a battle, because a lot of the time that communication is very open and not necessarily always wrong. A lot of people, like, I know people who think that I could pray away autism, or that it is because I've done something wrong, or my parents have done something wrong. And it's like,
it's neither because of this man's sin nor his parents' sin, I think is.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like there's a lot of things that no one knows everything. Continue to learn. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Cool. Do you want me to tag your social media?
You can if you'd like.
Do you want to say it really quick?
It's at EchoSplain, ECHOSPLAIN.
Is that actually your last name?
It is. And if you say it really fast, it just sounds like explain.
Explain. Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does sound like
Yeah.
explain.
Yep.
It's funny because it makes me think of, like, whenever I first read your last name, I thought of like mansplain. Like,
that's my dad.
Yeah, and like it became more ironic whenever I heard about your dad. I'm like, oh, and this guy's last name.
Yeah.
So fitting.
Yes.
So, Okay, cool. Well, it was really wonderful talking to
It's
you.
nice
Echo.
talking to you. I'm
So-
glad I met you by accident yesterday.
Yeah. All right. Next Saturday, guys. Here we are at the end of the video. Since you're here, you might as well consider liking and subscribing. Always remember to keep on seeking to understand and love the people around you. I'll see you next Saturday, guys. Bye.